Everybody here on board, ready to go? Good morning. Good morning. Oh, we have a little chair. That's nice. Okay. Good morning. Sorry for the slow start. My name is Robert Scott. I'm with the Mulholland Institute, or mulhollandinstitute.org at the renowned room. And it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. If you don't know him, you should, David Abel. He publishes the planning report, produces the Verde Exchange. And the important thing about his work is that he doesn't just deal in public policy, but he deals in actual people behind public policy. The planning report, as you may know, focuses on land use issues in Southern California, and he also does the Metro Investment Report. And I should mention these are out in the hallway on the table, or are they right here? Okay, he's passed them out, which covers public infrastructure investments. For 2 decades, David has served on the Executive and Governing Board of LAEDC, as well as ULI LA, and several educational NGOs. He's chair again on 3 California Speakers Commissions involving state and local finance, initiative process reform, and regional governance. For 12 years, he was an adjunct professor of urban studies at UCSD and served as chair of the USC Price School of Public Policy Board of Overseers. So he's going to tell us what he does in his spare time. David?
Thank you, Bob. Well, it's a small group, and we have just a couple minutes, but I'd like to break the rules here for a second and have everybody just do a 10-second introduction of your name and what organization you're with that brought you here. Can I start with you?
Kimberly Robinson, Water Companies.
Okay.
Demetrius Clauses, architect at GD. James King, Piston County, I do rentals.
Okay.
Louis Vivier from the practice.
Okay, please.
Emily Greenstreet from Green Dinosaur. It's a sustainability consulting firm.
Please.
Lissy Zising, I'm an architect with Stantec.
Please.
Peter Bond, Property State Aging Services. Wayne Aldrich, VCA Green, Code Compliance and Sustainability.
Please.
Lauren Burbank, LA County Office of Education.
Great.
Jim Valencia, Fulton College.
Please.
Joanna Military, Principal Advisor, Architecture.
Rick Crane, architect, Crane Architectural Group.
Juliana Lopava, City of San Juan.
Erica Martin, Port of Long Beach. Monty Shaw, City of San Francisco.
Chris Smith, graduate student in architecture.
Mission, the City of Papa.
Ross Ellen with the planning report.
Kevin Chen, in Orange County Planning and peer review secret documents.
Great. So we're just introducing your name and where you're from, what organization you're with. Could you introduce yourself?
Not yet. Arnie Listings with Recreation and Parks, City of Los Angeles.
Sure.
Ben Gaitas from City of LA, Recreation Parks.
Terrific. Okay, so my credential is I'm married to an architect because I see a lot of architects here. So 40 years I've lived the ups and downs of married to an architect. So our panel is about accessory dwelling units. It's a hot topic. Inside the thing that we passed out is a Metro Investment Report with an interview of the State Senator Wajkowski, who's carried the bill last year and this bill addressing it. Also some conversations with 2 others that are involved in accessory dwelling units. It's a very hot topic at the city and at the state level, and we're delighted you're here. I want to just sort of set the table for the presentations you're going to hear from the 3 experts we have here. But we want to note that there are 200,000 unpermitted ADUs in the state. I think we have, Andy, you may qualify this, about 40,000, 50,000 in LA. Yeah. So it's an issue of, as we talk about and as the presenters address how we might want to encourage more ADUs. We have a lot of ADUs that are unregulated, unpermitted, and we don't know what the impacts are. Nate Wilson's going to talk about ADUs, how they can be sustainably planned and constructed. I think he's an architect, and I think most of you here, given your introductions, will care about that. Amanda is obviously brilliant because the mayor pulled her out of Deloitte, brought her down here. She's looking at what the city can do to pilot and finance ADUs. She's using the resources of the city, but she's also utilizing the resources of outside funding from Bloomberg Philanthropies and others to experiment and demonstrate what can be done here. Bob Scott has been a planning commissioner of the city of LA. He's been a rabble rouser in the valley, San Fernando Valley. He's understands the homeowners and planning issues that dominate Los Angeles and the role that ADUs can play here in alleviating some of the housing crisis. You know, I have a lot of other notes here to talk about ADUs, but it's all in those descriptions. The experts are here. I want to get into their presentations, which include some slideshows. I just want to note, I don't know what was behind here, whether there's another slide here, but there's a lot being written about this, and we'd love to, we'd love to engage you or have you be introduced to all the literature and the individuals that are playing roles at the city, state, and national level about what's happening with ADUs and in the profession. I've been on the board of the AIA by mistake, been on the board of ULI. So there's lots going on in these discussions, and your input would be most welcome. Now, do you want to start off this presentation? You've got the substantive way of setting the table here. Go for it.
Great, well, let's get up to slide 7. Let's talk about the knee-jerk reaction by individual legislators who are grandstanding for attention is only making matters worse in this. This information provided by merchants of doubt, overregulation, single issue advocacy, a leadership vacuum, and apathy are some of the challenges of providing additional housing here. Any architects here that are conversant with the canons of sustainable architecture and urbanism by Stephanos? Okay, we got one. Let's move to
He
this
gets
slide.
an A. He gets an A. Everybody has a
Okay. So additional planning goal. Oh, let's keep going. A couple behind. We know that guy. And that was the reason we had multifamily big block. That's one solution. Mixed use retail. That's another. We're talking about accessory dwelling units as a possible solution to our housing issues. Next slide. They are aspirational is a planning. The insights in this are from a white paper that I wrote at UCLA Graduate School of Architecture in 1991. I'd like to again give thanks to my professors, Jacqueline Levitt, Peter Cannister, and Billy Burns, who reviewed and provided comments on this. I'll just boil that paper down to housing is a central component of a neighborhood. Neighborhoods are organic, each with a different set of physical constraints and character. Los Angeles is a collection of polycentric regions. The drive further approach to finding places for more housing and new neighborhoods is no longer valid or sustainable. We need to accept higher density. ADUs are a marginal increase in the existing single-family housing density, which utilizes infrastructure, existing infrastructure, and shifts the focus from a car-centric design to a design for people and multi-modal transportation. Next slide. So the change in household size, you know, is this choice by necessity? You don't know, but the data shows that the people are living in smaller houses, and there's the trend line. Next slide. The new single-family houses that are being constructed in square foot, again, we get the data, and we take a look at it, and it's indicating that the market is providing larger houses. Why? Maybe an over-marketed, consumer-driven culture that did not understand the meaning of enough would need more space to store more stuff, resulting in a 5,000 square foot single-family house with a 3-car garage. That's not most people in this room, is it? Okay, look around the room. Maybe past that culture, but I'm not going to be judgmental. Next slide. So this kind of puts the two together as far as the line here being for City of Los Angeles will increase this, what we're building now, so you can jump that on top of that to project going out to the future. But bring this around to understand that you're going to need better data. You know, how are we going to know what the future is? How are we going to know how to plan for the climate change eventualities? So at a minimum, planners and scientists need more granular data to track and inform the policies that are being proposed to assure that we are meeting the sustainability goals regarding reduction of GHGs and ending the use of fossil fuels. 12, last, urban fabric. You know, this kind of military-grade rocket science is now in the palm of our hands to be able to go on Google Earth and take a look at this. It's just amazing how far we've come in this regard. We're experiencing disruptive technologies here. For some reason, it's empty here in Santa Monica Freeway. You've got a little example here, but this whole neighborhood is like an urban fabric of lots that are served by an alley, areas with tremendous tree shade that shades it and provides for that. Pedestrian connections through the bridge to shopping over here. So it's got the potential
to be a really sustainable node, and part of that building block of a good neighborhood. So applying the living building challenge and low living criteria to ADU design will help to heal this urban fabric, which, as we get to the lot, we start to run the numbers. We see that we've given up the street circulation and alley circulation. This 6,500 square foot lot gives up 30% off-site circulation and another 25% to the interior circulation to make the automobile happen. Next slide, please. So, if we analyze this in terms of sustainability and ADU, this existing garage can be completely converted to an ADU. Respecting the required setbacks, this additional area can be completely converted to ADU construction. Next slide, please.
As far as this,
Go back just a second.
quick question on the setbacks. So I thought LA had a rule where you do.
It's not LA. This
Okay.
is City of Santa Monica,
Okay.
and all that stuff is, it's just a typical example of where the area is that you want to look at in terms of this particular conversion. Again, looking at the site, kind of ask myself, alley circulation, why didn't they originally go the garage this way? Because it's not what they were thinking when they designed this. It's a 1940 era plan, and it's designed to make the car happy. We got a little house for the car there, and we had to park it prominently in the front driveway, or the front yard in some cases, but that's our car culture. Okay, so we have to set some goals. Sustainability goals for this, and again, the goal setting is really important aspect of this, and we bring in the, not only the owner's aspirations, but those requirements for the structural, for the mechanical, for the electrical. It's an integrated design process where you get the goals out and you set them up so that you can try to meet them as best you can inside. So there's, starting with this, smart system controls. Probably the most important one. The rest of these are pretty much out of the book for lead building criteria, living building challenge, and well building criteria. But to engage the audience better, how many people are lead? Got a few. How many people are living building challenge? How many people know what living building challenge is? Good, we're getting there, and well, the well criteria. See, this is the group I came to exchange ideas with.
So they're converting.
Yeah, and you're probably here for the overview marks. So example site design, let's go to the next, finish those slides. Integrated design process, design 101, don't tear it down. This is all we're tearing down on this. Reduce it, and besides, the stuck one that has some hazmat disposal issues, so we're going to try to keep that. Next slide. And this is the proposed site plan for this with the residents and the open space. And look at what a small footprint we've managed to develop here for the project. We've got just this much area, 400 square feet, and a little overhang for the stair there. We got all the shared open space, which can provide amenities like raised bed planter and graywater filtration, other things that you want at that site. Next slide. So again, integrated design, Bruce Resnick, structural engineer, he didn't make it. But, I've gone through the plan with him so that he's supporting all the needs of the project, including, photovoltaics on the roof and the mechanical systems. Next slide, please. And Cliff Ishii also didn't make it, but, there's got a lot of work to do. But again, we incorporate design here so that we get 19 PV panels, we get a battery, we can do some resilience if the grid goes down, 12 dedicated circuits in, having little issues with Edison about being able to put what I need for this project and the main house on one roof that's not on the main house, but I'm sure I'll be able to sort that out. Let's go to the last slide, which is some of the impediments to taking, there's a, got an order here, but there's a upstairs plan, you're about 250 square feet, there's the roof, separate the property line condition here, here's the property line condition, goes to the existing garage construction that we're making, kitchen living, complete living unit, so accessory dwelling unit complete. The last one. Construction projects are not for the faint of heart. There is a risk, and there are unknowns, and there are a lot of variables. So many owners look at short-term return on investments, especially if they're planning to sell and move. They do not design or build ADUs for the lowest life cycle cost. Also, this is still a seller's market. There's a huge demand. Single-family residential with unpermitted ADA constructions are still selling just as fast as permanent construction. Less restrictive ADU ordinances may actually be driving costs up as people value the potential ADU rental in the sales price. So I'm going to hand off to Amanda with the city.
Let me just throw in, the slides will be available at mulhollandinstitute.org, the updated slides tomorrow morning. There's some unupdated slides today.
As Amanda begins, I just want to keep this lively and provocative. A little bit of what Nat has shared with you, and this is your house, is this what you're doing, Nat, or a good example?
Anybody from the city of Santa Monica here? No,
Yeah,
it's
but-
not my house.
I just want to say there's a little bit of a likeness to a pharmaceutical commercial on your programming and television, which is the last part when they rush through all the things that could go wrong. You just rush through all the things that could go wrong. Just remember that like when you're buying medicine. So,
I'm
Amanda.
an architect, I confess.
Question?
We'll take questions and let's go ahead.
No, let's do a minute. Let's go through it and we'll come back to the questions.
Sounds good. Well, my name is Amanda Duffus. I work for the City of LA. I'm the director of what we call the innovation team. The innovation team is essentially like a small consulting firm that was started in the city. We work for the city, but we were funded by a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is what was mentioned earlier. So the reason why that matters is because a lot of the work that we do will focus on housing, but we've also worked in spaces of policing, we've worked in the space of business, and really our job is to help LA look at some of the harder things that are happening and try to solve those problems, come up with new solutions. Some of the work we've been doing around ADUs began in 2015. So I've now been at this really hard work, actually, for about 3 years on behalf of the city. So what I'll talk to you about today is really two things. One is just the nuts and bolts of sort of where we are today in terms of legislation, in terms of policy, and I'll give you just a little bit of insight in terms of how the Department of Planning is thinking about ADUs and how my colleagues at planning probably would present this when they talk about just the nuts and bolts and things you need to know about ADUs. The second thing I'll talk about briefly, if we have time, I have 10 minutes, I'm going to talk really fast. I'm from New York, so I can definitely do that. But the other thing I'll talk a little bit about is the projects that we've started in the city, some of which we're doing and that we commissioned, and then other things that we're doing in-house, because I think they're all really interesting, and I think they point towards the direction that the city is trying to go, which is really trying new things and learning as we go, particularly in this space. For the city, I think just fundamentally what I would say is the city, and hopefully you've all been following the LA Times over the last couple of days and weeks, the city really is looking at ways to innovate around options for housing. The reason why we're doing that is because as you look at sort of the rise in homelessness, which I'm sure none of you would be surprised about, one thing that's really important is that we find new housing solutions. So back in 2015, our point of view was that ADUs actually presented that opportunity, and it was a controversial point of view at that time. But now, sort of 3 years later, I think it's really exciting to see all of you sitting in the room, and it's exciting to see the city thinking about that and others in the community partnering with us to do those things. So very quickly, which I think Nat touched on, ADU is really a second home on the lot with an existing primary dwelling. So essentially what we're saying is there's already a house there, and you're either building something brand new in the back, or you're converting a garage or a pool structure or some other kind of structure that may be there to make it livable. So that is essentially fundamentally for the city what that definition is. We think, and I think many others now are beginning to agree, a valuable form of housing, particularly if we can bring them in for low construction costs, serve a variety of different kinds of people that live in the city and want to live in LA and may even be moving here, and can extend homeownership. The reason why we think that is because it creates oftentimes a new source of income. So if you have a primary home and now you can rent that out, or you can even have your parents live there, and you can have, that's why they were called granny units, because people oftentimes had their grandparents or their elders living there, hence the name granny flats. But they're rentable, and they can also be used by nurses, aides, all sorts of different folks for what is now an aging population, so it serves that point as well. They also have done really well, a low environmental impact, and with all of your help, the more and more we can be looking at doing it in that way, and the city is really excited to see that being important. Generally speaking, there are local ordinances that regulate these and provide parameters. In the city of LA, we have a local ordinance, but like many other cities in the state of California, we are now deferring to the state law, which changed in 2016. So the new state laws, AB 2299, was passed in 2016. It was signed, I believe, on September 30th of 2016 by the governor. And essentially what that did is it provides a by right ministerial process for ADUs. It also complies, it makes it such that we comply as LA with those state laws that were passed in 2016. Essentially, in 1985, we had an LA second unit law, and that was what was on the books until 2016. In 2016, and as of 2016, we're now deferring to state law. We are not alone. Many jurisdictions around the state are doing that. And the reason why we're doing that is because it helped guide the parameters that the state saw as important to bring these online as housing supply. It also creates the option for LA to have local rules, but at this time we are deferring to state law. So our 1985 law as of 2016, or actually the January 1, 2017 became null and void. We now are in fact using the state's ADU law, and any new city ordinance has to incorporate the state law. So your question probably then is, well, what is the state law? The things that the state law changed were basically mostly around size. I've changed a couple things. So size, so now you can build an ADU up to 1,200 square feet in the city of LA. You can also, and it cannot be, however, more than 50% of the structure that is the main structure. So the reason why I always think about it is if your front unit is 2,000 square feet, you can't build anything that's more than 1,000 square feet in an ADU. And it is subject to your location, and it is subject to review. Parking, here are the rules around parking. So you can have one space per ADU, or no spaces if you're within a half mile of public transit. And the garage doesn't actually need to be replaced, so that can be then therefore uncovered, and tandem is also setbacks are not required for garage conversions, and you can have a 5-foot setback if built in top of the garage or on top of the garage. Passageways are not applicable, except you still need a 10-foot between the two buildings that would be on a property, so you and your neighbors won't. All conversions within the existing buildings are allowed, and you have to comply with the independent and fire safety setbacks. So that's essentially what happened as a result of the state law. This is a snapshot of our local DCP, City Planning and DPS memo that essentially outlined all the things that would be true for LA. And you can access, it's covered, but you can access it on the website that hopefully you've all visited, planning.lacity.org. So if you wanted to read the memo in full, that's what it outlines a lot of what I mentioned, that's where you can find it. Nat mentioned some of the data. My team has spent now 3 years really looking at the data. When we started that work, I would say that there wasn't a ton of knowledge about that. Not knowledge, but we weren't elevating it, I think, as a city is a better way to say it. And so the reason why this is important is because when we look at sort of the last really 10 to 15 years around ADUs, a couple things are true. One of the things that's true is that we anticipate, academic estimates estimate that there's about 50,000 that have been built illegally. As of 2015, when we started this work, there were about 600 that have been permitted legally between certain periods of time. So that's just, it's not over the time, over the course of history, but within a certain period of time that we were studying, which is about a 10-year period of time. What you see here, obviously, if you love math and numbers and graphs as much as I do, is a spike at this last part. So what this is telling us essentially is between 2016, when we had 142 permits that were applied for, where by 2017, second half, we're sort of at 1,100 at this point in time. So obviously that's a pretty significant spike. A couple of things are important to know about that. One is that because you apply for a permit, doesn't actually mean, as you all know, that you will continue, that you will build, that you will get a C of O. And as ADUs come online and people learn more about them and they become, I think, a professionalized practice, right now it's a very grassroots thing. I think we'll probably see a lot of opportunity as the numbers change. But I think that that's important to know. The other thing that's important to know is that the city was actually not issuing permits for about a year and a half. And the reason why was because there was a lawsuit that was happening. So there was a sort of cease and desist on all permits. So we often say that there is pent-up demand reflected in this number, but all that being said, it's important to know that there has been a jump. When you ask sort of what the breakdown is, it's also important to know that ADUs are a significant part of single-family housing and our housing supply in LA. So it therefore becomes really important that we look at them and we do them in a sensible way, and that we do them in a smart way, which is a lot of what the city is trying to think about now. When we look at the sort of the space of ADUs, as I had mentioned, you can convert, you can build new construction, sort of all those things count as ADUs. This is a really important graph to us because there's fear about new building in backyards, and folks might come out and say, well, I don't want a new big structure in my yard. I think this is really important because when we look at sort of the breakdown, you can see that a lot of what's happening is actually conversions. So taking a unit or a structure or a space that's already in a backyard and now converting that into something that's livable. So I think that that's another really important thing to know. Much of this is being done by owners and builders. That means the process that you follow through the city will be a thing that's maybe a little bit more organic than if you were to have a professionalized contractor helping you through. And then this is just an update for you all on, as I mentioned, we have the state law that we're referring to. There is a proposed ordinance here in LA, and so that ordinance, if it moves forward, would do a couple of things, which is it would really it would address movable tiny homes. It would potentially restrict ADUs in hillside areas. It would prevent parking in the front setback, and it would limit sort of what can be done in equine zones. And then finally, it may try to address the size limits, which, as I mentioned, are up to 1,200 square feet or 50% of that front unit. In the interest of everybody's time, I will skip over this, but suffice it to say that when you look at this map on the right, this is something that we had done just to get a better sense of where a lot of the permitted units actually are in the city, and then where they are when it comes to hillsides. As you can see, not a lot is actually being done in hillside. Much of it's being concentrated. When you think about sort of density, that's an important thing to think about. I think we already went through most of this. This is just what defines an ADU, and I think we sort of touched on a lot of that. I think I've also touched on a lot of these things. But as you think about ADUs, these are things that the city is thinking are important and places where folks should pay attention. And that is the assessment of the property, and the rent stabilization ordinance, which hopefully folks are familiar with, but essentially that is the law in the city that if a home was built pre-1978, it's subject to our rent stabilization ordinance, and what that essentially does is it puts that unit into stock that means your rent can't go up for more than generally 3% a year. So it's important to note because when the front home is RSO, we get a lot of questions about does the back home then automatically defer to RSO? And the answer at the moment is yes. Utility connections are important to know. How do you hook this thing up? Are you going to connect it to the main home? Are you going to run sewer out to the street? So there's a lot of those kinds of things for those who are entering into this space to be really cognizant of as our building codes and then the power line easements. I'm going to zip through some of the, I think, really cool stuff that we're doing in the city. We have a lot of active work happening in LA at the moment. You've read about some of it in the planning report. In 2016, we commissioned a project with LA Moss and Habitat for Humanity and Genesis LA. They are partners of my office, and what we wanted to do was actually work with the family to try to look at the state law and try to look at the local law and build a home. And so that is now what we're doing. We, just like everybody else that may be building an ADU, have been subject to all the changes, we've been subject to everything that's happened, and therefore we have a really good point of view on the things that would be in the best interest of the city to actually consider changing or making easier. So this is a picture on the top of the design that was done by LA Moss. We recruited families, so real life people that were building a home in their yard. They will live in it actually over the course of time. They decided that it's a husband and wife, and they decided that they're going to move into the unit themselves, and they're going to rent out the main home that they live in right now. This is our breaking ground last summer. So you probably see, we recognize like the planning director and some of the council members, the family, and some of the other partners. We're due to complete this in August. It's been a long journey, and I would say that I've grayed a lot over the course of building this, as have many other people that have been on this project, because it's really hard work, and we've learned a lot about what the city can do differently around permitting. Can we make it easier? Can we make it more clear? What are the things that we can actually do as a city? But I'm really excited for it to conclude in July because we will now have a lot of those learnings. On the right, the takeaways from that project are now being rolled into a project that we just got funded through a grant And that will really let us as a city look at how do we build on the work that's already been done over the last 3 years, and how can we actually perhaps simplify the process, make it more clear. What are the things that we can do as a city to address some of these items? And then most importantly, how can we think about this concept of housing supply, and how can we then potentially pair new ADUs or old ADUs or people that are just interested in housing folks who may, due to the cost of living going up in LA, may be interested in living in a home. So think of it as a Craigslist for folks that are low income or folks that actually need a place to live. That's what we're starting to think about now. Some resources, if you're interested, we developed as part of what has been this 3-year project. We're building a home, we're learning, we're collecting all those insights. We've done a ton of data work. We've really formed a point of view now and help the city and help our planning department do some of this work. But we also work with UCLA to create a guidebook so that for folks who are interested in building an ADU. Certainly there's the whole process that you go through. If you're going to plan or build, whether you're an architect, you're a contractor, whoever you are, there's the part that you're going to go through with the city, but there's a lot that has to happen before you even enter into that process, like deciding if it's a good fit for you and your family, deciding how you're going to pay for these things, what happens if costs go up. So this handbook was really meant to be kind of a step-by-step on how one would consider doing ADUs. We released it in the fall, so given changes, there are already going to be changes to it later this year, but I would encourage everybody to look at that. A really great partnership between the city and UCLA. And then lastly is this memo that I think I had already mentioned, but you can find it online at the link below, and it just talks about what accessory dwelling units are. Again, the nuts and bolts of what it was, what it is now, and sort of what we're headed as a city. So I think that's I hope I did my quick run through. I'm happy to answer any questions. We're really excited, and we think that this is a space that has a lot of opportunity, but also can, that we benefit as a city from those that are doing this work in the field and can provide feedback to us and help us shape what we think is sort of the future of affordable housing.
Amanda, thank you. Let's give it to Bob. Before I introduce Bob, I want to have you note when Amanda said there was a year of no permitting, on page 10 and then followed on 14 is the lawyer who blocked the issuing of permits. And I just want to read you 3 paragraphs from his interview, because I think you have a really intelligent expert here working for the city of LA. We have Santa Monica here and other architects that work in lots of other jurisdictions. There are a lot of internal inconsistencies in what's going on with ADUs, a lot of different missions and goals, and they have to be reconciled. And it isn't easy to do. But I want to read you 3 paragraphs from Carlisle Hall's piece. In this piece, he read, "The city, for all practical purposes, had refused to follow its own ordinances on ADUs for about 10 years. That's why we have 50,000 unpermitted ADUs. The planning department and Department of Building Safety were approving and issuing many permits that were unlawful under the city's ordinance, and the court ordered them to stop that. That put the city in a position where it had to act. It had either to legalize the activity that had been illegal by changing the ordinance regulating ADUs, or it had to retain the law and start following it. The court ruling, which Carlisle won, was at the beginning of 2016. In response, the Planning Commission and City Council launched a series of hearings regarding the Planning Department's ADU proposal, culminating in the Council in September 2017 action. It decided to keep the city's existing local ordinance with the older, tighter, stricter standards that allow fewer ADUs while making sure that those ADUs are compatible with their surrounding neighborhoods. That lasted only about 4 months. For you architects trying to deal with certainty, this is uncertainty. Then a new state law kicked in which told every city in the state that they had to make certain changes in their local ordinances if they wanted to retain local control over accessory dwelling units. Los Angeles, however, took the default position of doing nothing, causing the state law, which exercised more looser control over ADU build-outs, to come into play. You are in the middle of a dynamic policy debate, both at the local level and at the state level. The definition of the goals, the construction of the goals, the implementation of what the regulations are going to be, the believability of whether any regulations would be enforced are all at play, and the architects are the ones that are liable. I turn it over to Bob Scott.
Thank you, David. Talking about policy, I think this is all about policy. I had the honor of presiding over the general plan adoption in 1993, 1994, the city of Los Angeles. At that time, we were talking about accessory dwelling units, and we received untold resistance from people on the local level, which is why I think some of the legislators took it on themselves in Sacramento to basically preempt what was happening in the jurisdictions with people not wanting to expand. There were all sorts of no-growth initiatives going on. At the same time, you have a growing population and you have this little conflict of how to make it work. I call this P3 on a micro level, or hidden treasure in your backyard, P3 for the common man, where we're talking about the idea of having individuals being able to have an opportunity to participate in a public-private partnership. And this time, it's the individual homeowner who gets to play the part and who actually gets to benefit in many ways from what takes place. It used to be that people would take their metal detectors out in their backyard and look for buried treasure. Now all you have to do is look out in the backyard, and there it is. It's a piece of land that's been already purchased and paid for. Part of the issue here, too, is also when you're talking about transit-oriented development and concentrating poverty. Concentrating poverty has not proven to be a good idea. It's actually better if you diffuse it more. And in many cases, that's not necessarily something that's done on a wholesale basis, but it's something that can be done incrementally. And you have this opportunity of adding to the housing stock and coming up with solutions for downsizing, providing flexibility for individuals in their homes and their families. There are, as they said, an estimated 50,000 units in Los Angeles already in existence that are illegal, that could be legalized under this. Many are unpermitted and unlikely to be appraised or financed. Big issue. This is a financial issue. Obtaining permits definitely adds value. If you can get a permitted unit as opposed to having an unpermitted unit, anybody who knows about appraisers or knows about banks knows that they will finance something that's actual and legal, but they're very unlikely to finance or appraise something that's not legal. So that's a first step. Some estimate nearly 500,000 eligible backyards exist in Los Angeles. Larger lots predominate in the San Fernando Valley, which is where also the number of illegal units predominates, because they had these larger lots back when lots were at more of a premium. Empty nests, established communities, areas where people have lost their children, moved out, moved on. They have a house that's too big for them. As Matt pointed out, there are people living in facilities with large lots, large houses that they actually don't need, and they have an opportunity to downsize in place. They may be able to add the ADU and still stay in their nice home. At the same time, they have seasoned mortgages, trust deeds, and they have homeowners' lines of credit. Many of these older people, baby boomers, who have paid off their houses or nearly paid off their houses, they have extensive amounts of credit. And while they may not be able to make the payments on a normal extended mortgage, they would be able to make payments if they could justify it based upon rental income on a property in the adjacent yard. One of the things, and I think it was referred to as organic growth, tremendous flexibility, rental for supplemental income. You can have privacy for the people who live in the ADU, but they don't necessarily have to live in the house. Sometimes we like our parents, but maybe not that much. Sometimes we have relatives that we're taking care of, and we have assisted care coming in and going 24 hours a day. We don't necessarily want that coming in and out the front door. So many people have already done these ADUs ad hoc or whatever other way to try to create an opportunity for them to be able to take care of aging in place and in-laws. Many of the people, when we did the Northridge Vision, for example, indicated a desire. They live in nice single-family homes, but they'd like to stay there. And this may be an opportunity for them to be able to stay in their single-family home as they grow older and not have to downsize to something much smaller and in a whole different location further from their family. It also adds to neighborhood stability. And I'm bringing this all up because of the idea that part of the deal here is to try to sell this to the people, to do outreach, to have your points to make with these people, seminars, outreach meetings. This is what we're working on trying to do at the Mulholland Institute. You have students and entry-level earners. You have a lot of children that are not moving out because they can't find the jobs, they can't get started, so they need a place to live for a while. And you have this flexibility to be able to move the family around, take the older folks, the extended family. Maybe you have family that comes here from someplace else that they need a place to stay. And then ultimately, the financial issues. You have no land acquisition costs. That's a real big payoff. You have very limited entitlement process, which is really ministerial. You have fallow land in people's backyards that can become residential units. and the unit becomes bankable. And the bankable part is very important. It's a safe equity investment. Let's just say I have a retirement fund that's limited. I can go out and I can build this house in my backyard where I can control the investment, I can control the income stream, I can control the expenses. So this is an opportunity for somebody to invest in themselves in a safe way because it is absolutely bankable. Adds value to your home, obviously, gives you future security. Just to do a really quick rundown, apartment, I don't have a slide on this, but I'll add one. Apartment rents in Los Angeles average $2,200. In Santa Monica, $3,400. With a home equity line of credit, at 15 years, $100,000 investments, let's say you could get it done for $100,000. Some people say you can, some people say you can't. You're going to be paying $473 a month. For a 30-year, you're going to pay, sorry, I got that backwards. You're going to be paying $736 a month. With a 30-year, you're going to be paying $473. Point being, there's a $1,500 difference. There's $1,500 you can bring in. It's free cash. It's for the use of your backyard. And it's something that will stay with you until the day you die or lose your home. And that's very important, I think, to a lot of people who are wanting to stick around for a while in their home, in their residence, in their neighborhoods. With a monthly income of anywhere from $750 to $2,000, less expenses. And then you also have a legal unit using a gross rent multiplier or net operating income. It adds $250,000 to the value of your property. I don't think a lot of people have thought about that. While it's creating stable families and neighborhoods. That's if it's legal. If it's not legal, none of those things will apply, generally speaking. I had actually asked one question here, and I don't have the answer, but I'm sure someone here does. How does this affect the regional housing needs assessment? Does this actually add 50,000 or 500,000 units that are essentially planned for that we can take as a credit against RENA? So I don't know how many are concerned about those kinds of issues. In any event, what we're doing is a lot of outreach to various jurisdictions, promote ADUs. We need to go out and sell this to people so they do it. I know it's a worn term, but win-win situation, this is a classic. If somebody can tell me why the numbers don't work, why this is not a win-win situation, I'd be interested in hearing about that. So anyway, the slides and probably a little video, however well it turns out, will be available at mulhollandinstitute.org after tomorrow morning. And there's some business cards on the table back there to remind you. That's it.
We got a couple minutes for questions. I just want to remember, what's the name of this conference? It's the Municipal Green Building. So we got a little bit of that in Nate's when he listed that list, like a pharmaceutical company that could go wrong. But we don't have a lot of advocacy for including those green building standards in whatever ordinance takes place at the state or the city level. So given what this conference is about, you may want to press some of these evangelists for ADU about meshing the two agendas. Any questions, please?
Quick question for Amanda. In LA, if you're constructing an ADU in an HPOZ or a historic preservation overlay zone, it's on your slide. I just want to be clear, you don't need to have additional parking. So if you're converting a freestanding 250 square foot garage to a 600 square foot unit, you don't need to basically supplement what you're replacing as far as parking, if it's an
I
HPO.
think you defer to the state law. All that said, you do have to have
Which is
special,
no.
Yeah, which is no. But you have to defer to things in the HPOZ on occasions. And an example of that is we're going through right now like choosing garage doors in a certain neighborhood, and we have to choose in compliance with the HPOZ. But we're deferring to the state law on some of these other items.
Please.
Yeah, and one thing about the ADU, it still has to comply with Title 24.
That's correct.
And because it has a smaller square footage, it has a higher ratio of envelope to square feet. So it actually is going to be pretty green if you're going to permit it. It's going to be pretty much a green building.
Yeah,
Great,
that's
please.
correct.
Please. 1, 2. 2, 1. Okay.
One of the, this is from
Little louder.
one of the issues that you guys are trying to tackle is the issue of housing in Los Angeles, and it seems like this has offered a lot of opportunity for renters and families having their kids move in. Is there any potential to have these ADUs subdivided and actually sold off as separate pieces of land? Is that something the city is looking at in the future so that it's not just geared towards renters, but it actually could be sold as individual property?
I don't think at this time we're looking at it in that way. At least we're not. We're looking at them as places where people can live. So at this time.
Well, if you were to build it and then subdivide it and sell it off.
The city would allow you to subdivide it, so I think.
Senator Wiener would, but maybe not the city.
I would say that from the city's point of view, there's all sorts of things that happen, but that's not one of the ones that we're encouraging.
Yeah, my planners have, again, city of Santa Monica, it'd be very difficult. You'd have to come up with a subdivision map, and it's really, those lots are gonna stay that way. They can continue to densify. This may get rezoned as an R3, you know, but you're not gonna be able to do that. You get additional utility hookups will be required by all the service providers, so the reasons for not doing it are just.
Let's get a question here, please.
You talk a little bit
Really
about,
louder.
you talk a little bit about utilities and whether you can use existing utilities and
You can, and it's subject to the permit review process. So you go through the process of building the ADU, and in some cases you'd be able to hook up to the main unit, and others, and for certain utilities you might not be able to.
not be able to.
You might not be able to.
And
What are those cases?
Could be capacity.
It's capacity, yeah, and quality. So if you have a front home that doesn't have the capacity to handle the new ADU in the case of water, you'd have to provide the specs on what the front home can handle, and then the back home may or may not be approved at that time, because given what the front home can handle. In the case of LA, if you're looking at things that are older, construction of the main home, I think at least my experience and going through the gray herring experience of building is that it really is just dependent on what the main home can handle. If homes are older, sometimes they.
Amanda, although you eloquently represent the city of LA, if the city defers to the state to set the rules, does it really matter what your position is representing the city of LA? It's what the state comes up with.
That's what the state comes up with, but I would also say that the city has advocated, right? So Mayor Garcetti has been an important advocate for housing in the state of Los Angeles.
But these people would have to fly to Sacramento to make their case, right?
You'd have to, or there are groups, in addition to the mayor's office, that are advocating, in addition to our planning office, that are advocating for smart policy, right? Like the goal is to have safe, clean, healthy housing. And if we're advocating for that as Los Angeles, then we're largest cities in the state, so we have a really strong voice. And again, back to the idea that the mayor is advocating for housing in Los Angeles so that we can keep up with our population and not have people sleeping on the streets. This is an important part of that equation, right? We talked a little bit about the math, but the math shows that it's an important part of the equation.
In the general case, I'd like to comment on the utilities. You probably need a 200 amp service. Many older houses only have 100 amp, but that's a small expense, $1,000. In terms of the sewer line, there's usually a 4-inch line. So if you're trying to use water conserving fixtures, composting toilets, any of those other measures that bring water, there's not going to be any reason that the utility would want you to upsize any of those. And your gas line service that's there could easily serve both. The water to that, you'll come to the same meter. You might need to go from 3/4 inch to 1-inch line, but it's just a marginal increase in the density, and the utility infrastructure is largely already there.
Let me get this question, please.
Thank you very much. On the topic of housing homeless, I know the county of LA had a program for a while where they were providing some funding in terms of development ADUs that would house people who were previously homeless. Is there any program like that going on in the city?
That's great, and I would say that yes, the county has, they last fall, I think, announced a pilot. And that pilot opened it up to residents and said, if you want to be a part of this pilot, we'll offset the cost of building an ADU if you would consider housing someone who is homeless. That pilot, as far as I know, hasn't, the ADUs have not been built, no one's living in them yet. But that is a pilot. Pardon me?
Aren't there just three?
Three, yes, there's three. So there's three that are part of that pilot. The city, we just won a grant, as I mentioned, and I applied for that grant to try to explore how we would go beyond the idea of just homeless people, but actually look at people who are on the edge of being evicted, right? Because we, as a city, we, and as a county, we know those kinds of things in places that are at risk of displacement. So if there's a way to pair people with kind of like the Craigslist, if you will, for folks that are willing and interested in opening up their housing to folks who, 26% of our homeless in Los Angeles have jobs. lot of different ways you can break down a population, and one of the ways that folks might be interested in housing. So that is what our new grant will go towards, is studying that and partnering with the county, because we don't want to do things in a box as the city, right? We have the county, we have, as I mentioned, we partner with Habitat and Ellie Moss and Genesis LA, who's worked with us to pioneer on financing for this over the last 3 years. We really wanted to figure out, we learned that financing was a really important part of why people are not building ADUs. I partnered with Genesis LA to try to create a financial product, and that's something that we're also testing right now. But
Get our business card. Let me get some more questions.
So we have a gentleman in the room from UCLA, and this could be graduate student housing. You know, depending upon who finances, this is a really interesting opportunity to meet a number of social needs.
Do you have a question?
Question for Nathaniel. What was the overall estimated cost of construction for that plans that you had shown?
What I showed is in schematic design. I do not have the cost estimates in, but in my experience, 15 years, that's the most important part. For the construction companies that I will hire, I need to meet their cost estimator, understand what he knows about the impact of tariffs, just the wide.
There's a cost estimator in the room, give him your card.
I would say that generally these cost $300,000 or less. You can do, so if you're building 1,200 square feet, $300,000 is probably fair, depending upon how green you want it, all those kinds of things. At the same rate, there's folks that are doing them for $100,000. So a lot of it is about the appointments that you choose and so forth.
One question over here.
Can a attached garage be considered ADU?
Attached, yes, there's 3 cases. You could have them attached, you can carve out part of like 5,000 square foot lot where you
You're
could
building your garage to a attached garage to ADU.
The research paper at UCLA is there, the white paper,
Yeah,
and
what
it
about
shows an
LA?
example. So there are 3 ways to do an ADU, and one of them would be if the 2 are connected.
Attached or detached.
Okay, likewise if it's detached garage, setbacks. You have 5 on the side, or you still have another?
If you don't demolish more than 50%, you're allowed to use the existing footprint with 0 setback. So again, the value there is about 20 feet by 5 feet. I showed the number there, that's worth about $24,000 in land value.
I'd encourage you to, depending upon where you live, I'd encourage you to get online and look at some of the links about just what the rules are and the state.
I think there are questions about whether or not also it's in the front of the house. If it somehow qualifies as being in the front, you can't do it. But if it supposedly is in the back, you can do it. And if it's right on the side, who knows? I don't know the answer.
Bring your parcel map to an architect who's an expert on ADUs, and maybe get an hour of free consulting.
I wanted to just make one last note on you had mentioned that there's the state law and like what can you do locally. There's actually a lot you can do locally, and your council people are people who want to hear from you. If you think that this is an important matter that can in fact contribute to housing, I would encourage you to reach out to your council people. This is
What if you don't?
And if you don't, then you're more than welcome to express that too. I mean, that's what council people are there for, that's what the mayor is.
Amanda, let me take 1 second, because I think we're just following this. Is there a difference in the ordinances and the regulations depending on our goals? If it's to house the homeless, does that have its own requirements? If it's just to add housing supply, does that have its own requirements? If it's to protect if it's to be granting flats and additional units for the integral part of a home on the lot, does that have an ordinance? If there's green building ordinances or ideas of zero net energy, does that affect the ordinance? How does that, it seems that we talk at a very high level of abstraction as we're for or against ADUs, but it depends what we're trying to accomplish, right?
That's right, yeah, I would say that the code is the code and the law is the law. So if you're building a structure, you follow the code. Now how we use that structure is we're trying to innovate, if you will, on that, or at least get it straight. So for all of you, it's very, very clear how you follow the code and you build something legally. I want to also mention that in the conversation about things that are illegal becoming legal, it's also really important to know that sometimes if people try to come in and make those legal, they're doing that because it's the right thing, but there's also a risk of people being displaced, right? So that's just a thing for you to be aware of. But I think to answer your question, the code is the code and you follow the code. There are programs that we're working on trying to bring about, which would perhaps incentivize things like housing, the homeless individual, whether that's giving you a $50,000 grant, as the county is doing with these 3 homes, to actually put towards your construction. We're trying to incentivize the behavior that we hope to see. And so that's what the grant that we will work on will now do, is look at and survey people and say, like, would you do this? If you would, how much does the city have to pay you to do it? And the reason why that matters is because it costs about $400,000, some estimate more, to actually build an affordable unit of housing by the laws of affordable housing. So if we can build ADUs for $150,000 and bring equity to a family that has a main home in the front unit and provide housing to someone who may be low income, maybe otherwise living on the street, or may just be like you and me, that's actually a win-win. There's a lot of work to do to get to that place where it's all working perfectly, but that's sort of what we're trying to figure out now.
Are there any other, does it matter whether these rules are set at the state level or at the local level? Speaking as a member of the mayor's office, does it really matter of any significance to this audience whether the rules are set at the state level or at the local level?
I think you follow the local rules, which in our case in LA are the state rules.
So that's a finesse. Does it matter whether the rules are set by the legislature or by the council?
I mean, I think it's always good to have local law because we all live in LA.
We're recording this, I just want you to know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a perfect answer to that. I mean, I think it matters in the sense that it's good to have things locally.
How about in Santa Monica? Does it matter to Santa Monica?
As a Santa Monica resident.
We got a couple of officials.
With the green aspect that currently in 2020, the state will make all new single-family construction net zero, but they've pushed the code and they've started that already. And in terms of ADUs, they've written a very clear ordinance allowing this to go forward. So I don't think that anything that someone will say at the state level is going to change that. I think that we're going to
Can I have that in writing?
David, I would say it's the state lays down the big picture, and the local municipalities can fit in all the little parts to make it work for their municipality. Just like we talked about, building safety is not the same as planning. Some people think it is. Building safety is a whole different thing. They still have to comply with building
We have
safety.
time? We have 2 more. I got 2 more questions. We got 1, 2.
I just have a quick question. You know, I just bought a house, but I'm also a builder and I work for the city of Santa Monica. And part of the big cost of these ADUs is bringing utilities to the ADUs. And in Santa Monica, you know, like even if it's from the main house, it's a large chunk of the cost. So in Santa Monica, we're looking at, you know, as part of decarbonization and all that, we're transitioning away from open flame technologies. If we were able to build ADUs without, you know, having to bring gas, or, you know, if I could just use my PV panels on the roof, is that something?
You know what word you're in, what building you're in there?
Yeah, I understand. That's why it's but is that a requirement in LA to have gas to the ADU? Like, do you need, if I can, you know, generate my own water on site with, you know, water from the air machine, and I have PV panels and I'm using a composting toilet, why do I have to do any site work besides build a slab? Like, do I have to bring outside utilities
My
in?
understanding is you're going to need water and sewer.
I'm sorry?
You're
Water
going to
and
need
sewer.
water and sewer. Other than that, combustion of fossil fuels on site is not a really good goal, and you don't have to do it. The electric provider, you know, you may have that connected, but drawing it, you're not required to draw electrons off the grid.
So I have to have water and sewer, even if I'm generating on site, you know, and I'm getting.
The Netherlands had to have water, so everybody needs water
No, I
and
know,
sewer.
but I'm
Let's
just
start
saying.
there.
Okay, that's the next session.
Yeah.
We have a question here.
So I understand this is to address homelessness and shortage of housing, but I see in some communities there could be, it's an opportunity for abuse. You know, we're working around the zoning codes, talking about one building being right up against the other. Is there any kind of mechanism to control the use? If someone gets this permitted, maybe I mean, we're talking about man caves, pool houses. I mean, we're talking about more building. So how do we control it so that it's functioning the way we want it to?
Were you cleared to get into this
Building and safety is there to make sure things are being done in a compliant way, and their job is to make sure that people aren't doing things that are crazy, right? And I you're building, whatever you're building and safety codes will come to your home and make sure that what you're doing is correct. And that is still the same thing for ADUs. In fact, there is a point of view, and I'm not saying this is a point of view, but there is a point of view that now that we're paying really careful attention, maybe enforcement actually is better because we know this is happening versus before when people were building them illegally. So that's just a
So you mean there are controls to make sure that it's an ADU?
Not
That
yet.
it's not a full house or it's being rented, it's
I
being
want
utilized?
to interrupt because we have a time constraint. You always want to leave the audience wanting more, and you have incredible experts up here, and they're going to stand here forever, so thank you very much, and I hope you'll give a hand to our panelists. Go get them.
Mr. Hart, you want to find out?
This one.